Alright, time for another draftphysics.com, debatephysics.com also, but again, uh, the debate is not in a form that has any use in illustrating anything reasonable and logical and that you can use as facts. It's all propaganda and bullshit. So Ian Gosling has made another fake, phony fraud video. I mean, it's just all, we've been over the fact that, there's variables. You've got to be careful of the variables. You've got to keep track of all this kind of stuff, whether you actually have accomplished what you claim, like, oh, here's a balance, and I'm going to do certain things with this balance. And you never tested to see if it's a balance. I mean, it's just too stupid.
Hello again, chaps. We've got a one mass here at one distance from the pivot. And then we're going to put the...
Yes, the pivot. Okay, so obviously it's balancing with the one mass on there. So that's strange right on the face. Oh, there's a spring attached. Okay, so he's got a spring attached in this weird configuration and two springs actually in string. So obviously he spent some time fiddling with this and it didn't work some ways. And so he had to change it to force it to be garbage as an experiment. And that's what it is. So, he doesn't really get this idea that, on a lever, you really do have to be precise about the weights and their positions. And if you don't get that right, then yes, it's not going to work. It's not going to be twice the velocity because it's in the wrong location to create twice the velocity. But he just doesn't care.
half mass at two distances.
So it won't be a half mass because he's got these things, these bolts in here with wing nuts on them, and he's not accounting for any of the weight of any of those things. So it won't balance. It won't work. The fact is, if he put a counterweight on the other side first and proved that they were the same one half the weight, he'd find out it isn't because the wing nut weighs something, the whole thing weighs something. You're putting it in different locations. It creates different amounts. It doubles the weight of the wing nut. Just a fact. So you can't have other pieces that you're putting on and off and then say, oh yeah, well this is a half. No, it's not a half mass. So the weights aren't what you think they are because you really didn't think about doing the experiment the right way. You're just trying to contrive an experiment for the purpose of deception.
Now, of course, in either case, the force here is exactly the same.
So he says it. The force here is exactly the same. So he's conceding the whole fucking point, which doesn't make any sense at all. So he's saying the force here is the same. I'll get
blindfolded. They would feel the same way, or they would measure the same force.
So he's saying they would measure the same force. So he's conceding the argument that the half mass at twice the distance is the same force, the same motion of the lever, as the full mass at one distance. So he's conceding the lever moves exactly the same. So how can it doesn't make any sense that because now he's going to argue that somehow they're moving different. So which one is it? Which one do you believe? It just, I mean, it's just so bad.
Statically.
No, there's no static. Gravity is not a static force. There's no static about a force. You're measuring a force. This force isn't static. It's causing stress in the materials. That's why you feel it. You feel the stress constantly. If you're holding something in gravity, it's not static. You feel a constant and necessary obligation to keep applying a pressure.
We're gonna, if that's the case,
whether you believe it or you don't believe it, it's a pretty simple premise. And you're the people defending a physics that hasn't figured that out in 350 years. You haven't decided that, well, maybe we should figure out whether you can tell the difference. And you can't even admit that that's pretty weak physics if it hasn't even done any of these experiments. That's really bad science. You can't say those words. It's bad science not to do these simple experiments and do them well. You can't concede that point. that if doctors did this, if doctors were this sloppy and reckless, it would bother you, right? If it was a matter of your health or your welfare, it would matter. But if it's just for propaganda purposes and just to prop up a little wooey crystal religion, oh, that doesn't matter. So let's lie, let's cheat, let's do it badly. Yeah, let's not do the experiments. I mean, just so bad. You people are just such hypocrites.
Then the frequency of oscillation and the forces exerted by these springs here.
So he's applying a little bit of force, then everything goes weak, and all you have is the weight of the springs, and they're bouncing all over the place. So in each case, you're not going to get exactly the same result. But regardless, yes, it has an oscillating rate based on the velocity that the mass is moving, based on what its real mass is, which is not going to be 1/2, because of even if we concede that these two bolts are the same, which they don't look similar at all, frankly. This bolt does not look like it weighs the same amount as this bolt. And they're, it's clearly got a wing nut on it, and he's going to move the wing nut from one place to another place, and that obviously is going to mean the wing nut's going to weigh more. It doesn't weigh the same in both cases. It weighs twice as much when you put it on the outside. Moron.
That frequency of oscillation.
It weighs in terms of force to compensate. Its motion will be twice the velocity, therefore you will have to put twice the energy in to move it.
Should be the same in both cases.
Yes, and if you did the experiment fairly and rationally, it would be. If you put a weight on the other side as a balance and then show that the two weights are equal, and then you show the other one is the same, then you'd have a case, but you didn't do any of that. And the clear, like I said, I can just blame the wing nut itself is enough to blow up your whole argument. There's wing nut on the two mass. When the wing nut is in that position, it weighs a certain amount. It requires a certain amount of force to move it. When you move it out to the outside, it requires twice the force to move it. So obviously the two experiments aren't involving the same force because you're using more force to move one than the other.
According to draft science.
So again, we're just doing the same thing over and over and over. They do a shitty, rotten, crappy experiment. They don't do any preliminaries. They don't show you anything. They just contrive this crap and then put it up on the video on the internet and say, there, debunk how I'm cheating again. I've done the experiment lots of ways. It didn't work this way. I finally broke it in such a way where, yes, it does what I want it to do. And that's all they're doing. Figure out what I did. How did I break it? So you're saying in the 8 days, that it took him to make this video, right? I don't know, something like that. There was 8 days where he just played around, did things, apparently. This is the best he could come up with. So this is his contrivance. So instead of just showing us the spring moving the two, and just seeing how fast they move, no, he's doing this oscillating crap.
He says that if you were blindfolded and you wiggled this end, you would not determine any difference between the one mass here and the half mass here.
Yes, there's no theoretical possibility that you could tell the difference. That's the truth of it, okay? You want to explain the theoretical possibility that you could tell the difference? It requires exactly the same force to move the two added objects. You have the same wheel, okay, presumably. If you put a two mass on the wheel at that location, 1 unit of distance, and then you put a one mass, 2 units of distance, the fact is the wheel is going to feel exactly the same. It's going to move exactly the same. People do this all the time. They balance wheels by putting little lead weights on the wheel, okay, to balance the two sides. It's a known thing, okay? So, yes, you explain to me how theoretically that's not true. So just explain to me theoretically how moving the two mass twice the velocity, the one mass twice the velocity of the two mass, doesn't take exactly the same force. Show me some example where that's true. And you can't do it without breaking it. Every single experiment you do is a piece of crap.
You would not feel it. Of course, I've shown that you do, actually.
No, he hasn't shown anything like that. So again, a preposterous lie. All right? So, nothing like it. There's no example of anyone doing the test, right? So in 350 years, they make this silly argument that somehow levers don't work. That somehow if I put the one mass on the outside, it only goes 1.4 the velocity somehow. Somehow if the wheel's spinning and I put the light mass on the outside, the half mass on the outside, that somehow the wheel only spins 1.4 faster. Well, it doesn't go any faster, that it goes 1.4 slower actually.
In an old video, I had two of these levers set up side by side.
Right, and I debunked that crap. I think it was exactly the same argument, that he just doesn't account for the fact that he's not changing the masses the way he thinks he is. The way he's applying the mass means that obviously you can measure the weight of that disc, but if you didn't measure the weight of the screw and the wing nut, you fuck the experiment.
One with the one mass here and the other with the half mass here. And with the same spring force on each, released together.
Obviously, they were both two different systems with two different axles, two different springs, so it's differences all over the place.
The half mass two distance clearly moves slower, much slower than the one mass.
So it clearly doesn't. What a pile of crap. He can't even link to his own video, so he brings it up and he can't even link to it. Right? There's no link anywhere. So it's just like, what the fuck? But obviously I did pay attention to it and I did debunk it, so.
One distance. Of course that was ignored, but...
So of course it wasn't ignored. That's a lie. So just more of your lies. Lie, lie, lie. That's all you have. It's lies and deception. You're just such a criminal. Just a liar, a fraud, a fake, a phony. Disgusting that people like you exist.
Anyway, get an idea of the frequency that is produced.
So get an idea that we have no evidence that he's got these weights right, or even that he has these distances right. No evidence at all. I mean, just a few millimeters off, frankly. With the half mass going further out, it increases in force required to move it. So I mean, it's you can't pretend it doesn't matter. It matters. It's really important. So he doesn't measure any of this. He doesn't time any of it. He doesn't do anything. He just says, look at this, and then I'm going to change it, and then look at it and see, wow, it looks different to me. That's it. That's all you get. So there's no precision here. He doesn't prove a value. He doesn't make a claim about 1.4 or anything like it. There's just nothing here but this garbage. Look, I did a garbage experiment where I didn't really technically make sure these masses were at the right positions for the ratios of the masses. And so I'm just doing a fake, phony, fraud video.
There's probably a formula for it.
Yeah, the formula is established by the law of the lever. That's the irony of all this. There's a law of the lever that basically demands that what I said is actually true, that it's the same force to move the half mass twice the velocity. They call that the law of the lever. So, like I said, the wing nut now weighs twice as much. So the wing nut he's holding this thing together with, and the screw looks like it wasn't there before because it looks longer than it was before. So who knows how much mass he's got off. But he's got at least the mass of the weight of the wing nut is obviously screwing this experiment.
This is the half mass at two distances.
So it's definitely slower, which means this velocity is slower, which means, yes, it's heavier than he thinks it is. Okay? He didn't do the experiment right. If he had a counterbalancing weight over here, it wouldn't balance. This would be too heavy. So if he had put a weight over here and shown, look, when the 2 mass is on and I put a 2 mass here, it balances. And then he could show that, look, when I put a 1 mass out here, it balances. But he didn't show any of that, okay? Because it doesn't balance because he doesn't have the masses right. Because he's a fucking idiot and he wants to cheat the truth. And so he just keeps on contriving experiments. And of course, we only see the ones that come out the way he's trying to contrive, that there's a flaw in the theory that momentum has to be conserved. He thinks he's going to prove momentum doesn't have to be conserved.
You can clearly see the difference in.
Yes, and I can clearly understand how you fuck the experiment. So whatever. So enough. So this is all he does. There's nothing else in here.
Frequency.
Look, you can clearly see it's just different.
I hope you can.
Yeah, well, it's different because you don't have the masses right, so you need a different force because the masses aren't right. So the lever's not moving the same because the masses aren't in the right ratio. You idiot. Okay, let's just might as well see if there's any comments worth wasting time on. Let's see, nice demo. They always say the same thing, just a bunch of shit. If he used his hands rather than blowing hot air out of his mouth, he may figure out he's quite obviously wrong. So again, I'm not quite obviously wrong. What's quite obvious is you're religious fanatics defending really bad science, and you're happy to do it. You don't care. You don't think science should be rigorous, well evidenced. They should just make shit up. They should distort and pervert. They should make plastic carts with metal wheels. Okay, so every experiment they do with the cart is a deception because most of the momentum is in the rotation of the wheels. I mean, all these little tricks. They should dent clay with round objects and say that's a linear way to measure. So goofy. So even Stephen Bro is doing this goofy crap. Yeah, so Sparky, the wonder dog, says Goofy won't see anything he doesn't want to see. So again, what would I see in this? This is a great experiment proving a fact, right? Is that what you're going to argue? That he disproved the law of the lever and he proved that momentum doesn't have to be conserved. And we all should believe it because of this shitty experiment. I mean, fuck you people. You can't be more despicable, can you? Can you be more despicable in your hypocrisy and your duplicity? I mean, you would hold no one on earth to these lowest standard. Again, if this was about what medication you were going to take or some pill, some doctor showed up filthy dirty, and with holes drilled in the bottle and gave you a medication, I'm sure you wouldn't take it. Oh, it's just so bad. Thanks for this demonstration. Yet again, another variant of this type of experiment showing that no, it's not the same thing. So this shows it's not the same thing. There's no law of the lever and you don't have to conserve momentum. And they've proven it with this brilliant piece of shit. No, I don't think so. So I'll just go back to the previous two videos, right? I mean, the oscillator, which I showed, 4 mass, 1 mass, oscillates perfectly. Must mean that those two things, a 1 mass going 4 times the velocity and a 4 mass going 1 velocity, momentum is conserved. It does work. That's how levers work. Anyway, and that's such a simple experiment, yet they can't explain why their theory isn't showing up anywhere. Why it completely contradicts their theory. All right, yet he never does this himself. Why should I have to do any of this myself? As I've pointed out a million times, why don't you assholes create some kind of noise where we would require real physicists and real scientists to do these fucking experiments the right way. Obviously, they should be done with high-speed cameras and precision instruments. The very idea that you want all of this done with your amateur nonsense. Why don't we do a prayer experiment, okay? I will pray to God, and let's prove the existence of God, because I will pray to him. I mean, what the fuck are you talking about? You people are just so despicable. Ugh, anyway. But oh, so proud of his lever balance on his porch, which of course is a decisive piece of evidence. I'm just saying, explain how it was a lie. Show me where I made a mistake, where I didn't have the masses right, where I did something wrong. You do what I just did. Show where I made a mistake, and where other experiments prove that to be wrong. That doesn't happen. When I think you know, of course, that's exactly the law of the lever. That's exactly what one expects, and that's exactly what a constant force from gravity guarantees. You fucking scum. I mean, these people are such scum. Okay. This is a simple harmonic oscillator ion. And if you paid attention to conservation of momentum, you would know you must have made a mistake because you're not conserving the momentum. Wikipedia has a page called harmonic oscillator, right? And it's going to talk about how it ain't going to be harmonic if there ain't the same energy going both ways. Yeah, that's not harmonic anymore. Oh, fuck. It's not an oscillator. Can't oscillate if it's more energy in one direction than the other direction, then the whole experiment moves, or it creates so much friction that it runs out of energy very, very quickly. Fact. Okay. Who cares about facts? Oh, these people are just so despicable. You're just so bad. I mean, you're going to defend this piece of absolute steaming shit as an experiment and say, oh yes, this is conclusive evidence of something. Amazing hypocrisy. Amazing. No, if I showed any other experiment proving one of my points done by some jackass who did an experiment this bad, I mean, come on. These assholes wouldn't say, well, that was a garbage experiment. Oh, amazing. Amazing that people can be just such fucking hypocrites. Disgusting. Do hate this planet. You people, I mean, just, again, you're just proving human beings are just such pieces of goddamn shit.